I'm trying to put on my video. Good afternoon, colleagues. My name is Gwede Mantashe. I work at the CSIR. I lead the work of climate change at the CSIR. I'm also one of the commissioners in the Presidential Climate Commission. And I want to welcome all of you to this session. I note that people are still joining, but it's just after 1 o'clock. So I suggest that we start. We've got an agenda in front of us that is going to guide us through this session. Perhaps if I may ask you, Tabiseng or Simpwe, to just share the agenda on the screen so that people are familiar with what we're going to go through today. Are you ready for that? Okay. So this is the agenda for this afternoon. We're going to start with DMRE, and then we're going to have reflections from various groups of people, representatives of groups. And importantly, we're going to open up the session for your inputs about just before 3 o'clock. So that's how we're going to proceed today. You may take it off. So before we start with the presentation by DMRE, again, I want to say thank you for joining us. I want to thank you for taking time to be with us this afternoon. The overall objective of today's conversation is to talk about the draft IRP 2023 and get inputs into that work. I'm not going to go on about the significance of this document. We all know how important it is and how it links to key policies, to key national policies in the country, and how it sets the tone for the direction of this country, not only in energy, but in climate and in other issues that are of national and international importance. So I want to invite the DDG from DMRE to give opening remarks before I ask Usonwabo to do his presentation. DDG, if you are here, please come in. So Nabo, can you confirm if your DDG is around?
Okay, will do. Just a moment. Thank you.
In the event she's not here, we'll proceed and we'll go to Sonwabo to do his presentation.
Okay, thanks, Commissioner. Whilst I think the DDG was having connectivity issues earlier on, I'm sure she'll be connecting at some point. But on that note, let me take the opportunity then to just take us through what we have prepared to be shared here today. Share it. Thank you very much for this opportunity once again. And please let me know if you see it.
Yes, we can.
Okay, thank you very much. Yes, yeah, the draft IRP was published on the 4th of January this year, after a number of months of development. And today we'll try just to unpack whatever we can. Unfortunately, we only have 15 minutes time on this presentation, but I think everybody now is now familiar with the report. So a lot of the details obviously are in the report, where there's clarities and so forth. We obviously are available to respond to those. We've also had a number of public engagement sessions, and which also have raised a number of questions and clarities that we're busy addressing. But anyway, without to cut a long story short, we are here today to engage on this draft IRP. We all know what an integrated resource plan is. It's premised on the ERA, and it's a legal instrument for electricity generation plan that obviously that aims to balance supply and demand, take into account certain constraints such as the reserve margin, but also some security of supply of the electricity sector. So it's an electric plan. I'll talk a little bit about it in terms of how it differs, especially with other plans. So this plan, its main objective is to provide for an electricity sector that meets security of supply. It's the main emphasis is on security of supply. Obviously, taking into account security of supply does not exist in a vacuum, but you need to take into account like costs. Obviously, those are a big driver, and also the impact on the environment. Whereas you see some plans or other plans, for example, and is the nature of the objectives of those plans is that they are centered on, for example, environmental or reduction on emissions to the point also of achieving net zero by a certain time. So obviously that tells you that the objectives or the objective functions of the different plans would then be slightly different. All right, and then key drivers, I won't talk too much. We know that there's a lot that has changed based on the previous plan that is currently an official plan, the IRP2023. We have stresses around load shedding, even up to date, because of the planned EAF that is not as per what was used in the IRP2023. We know that also some of the assumptions, the decommissioning plan for Eskom plant. I think one thing that we don't speak about that is of importance, probably leading up to the final plan, it will be part of the report, is also that a lot of renewables that have been commissioned will also be decommissioned within the study horizon. And then also, as part of the assumptions, there's a rollout of new generation capacity, which has not been as per the previous or the current plan, the 2019, due to a number of reasons, chief amongst them being transmission constraints in terms of how much can be connected, especially in areas that have got high resources that are preferred. We know like developers of certain projects prefer certain locations in the country. And those are the areas that have got serious grid challenges. I think we were able to demonstrate with this plan or in the analysis of this plan about how much of the grid is available that can safely and reliably connect new capacity in the Cape areas. And then, the transmission grid, whilst we're on it, still requires a lot of development. We all know it. We've seen the TDP. There's quite a lot of work that needs to be done. I've seen also the Just IP. We've realized also that a transmission development is a big element of the ESI, because without it, it then becomes difficult to connect. And we note that the TDP says you need about 250 billion South African rands to be able to roll out that many thousands of kilometers that are required in order to make sure that you can connect new capacity, especially renewable capacity. So in doing the IRP, obviously this was important for us, especially up to 2030, which is a period of stress for the country. And then the demand, we've had economic challenges, both globally and in South Africa. And as a result, the demand also did not materialize as envisaged in the IRP 2019, but also there's been a lot of constraint on the demand as a result of capacity that is not enough to can be able to provide everything that needs to be provided. Yeah. And then there are other changes, obviously, that have happened in the ESI. The first one is obviously there's a number of initiatives that have been put in place for various reasons. The first one that we put here is the JET IP 2023 to 2027, 5-year, and the subsequent implementation of it for that period that I've just mentioned now. And we understand that this JET IP is driven primarily by reducing CO2 emissions for the country, and with an ultimate aim of reaching net zero by 2050. And yeah, we've actually looked at the contents of the plan because the electricity sector is also covered in there. There's also the energy action plan that is also being designed to reduce load shedding. This one is primary objective is to end load shedding or to reduce it. And we've seen what some of the main focus of that plan are in terms of, for example, helping Eskom to improve performance of coal-fired plant. And then another key change was the removal of the licensing requirements for Schedule 2 projects. That is, it used to be 100 megawatts and it was completely removed. And I think those projects, together with government projects, the bid windows, different bid windows, form the basis, especially for the period up to 2030, for the analysis for the period up to 2030. And then the process for developing this IRP review is straightforward, like all the other ones. Starts with gathering of data inputs and assumptions. Some of it I've already spoken to, and it's a lot of data that gets collected. And then technical work then gets done using sophisticated computer software. In this case, it was Plexus. But then for the forecast, also different software was used by whoever did the forecast. And then, and this actually is the bulk, the data collection and this technical modeling takes up the bulk of the time for this type of work. It's actually a lot because data must be interrogated, and the model is not a plug and play, it needs to be developed and tested. There's a lot of testing that even happens before the modeling happens to ensure that the model represents the South African ESI in particular, and that it does what it needs to be done, that it needs to do. But I think also where another difference comes in compared to other processes that some of them I've alluded to, is that this model has got the capability to mimic on an hour by hour what the system operator, because ultimately whatever plan you put on the table will have to be implemented on a day by day, hour by hour, like the challenges that the system operator will be faced with and where they'll be able to balance supply and demand. And there's a lot of effort actually that happens. And then once all this work was done, we then took it in order for us to be able to publish it. Obviously, we compile a draft report and presentations that then get taken through various consultations with different governmental departments. Then ultimately, it goes to it gets shared with the executives, the cabinet, who then will then approve it for gazetting for public engagements. So we've already done through that, and where we are now, we are at the stage of public inputs, after which time then once we've gotten all the public inputs, a lot of it criticism, some of it good information, all of this will be considered, and then further technical work will be done, and that will then lead to the final plan. This final plan at some point will then be policy adjusted by the minister and the executives in the department. And then it will also then be taken to the executives for approval, for implementation. The assumptions, I'm not going to go into it. I've spoken about it. Forecasts is one part of assumption. There's different trajectories that can be looked at. Eskom existing power plants performance is a big debate. It's a subject of interest. We've taken a view as the department based on what we've seen, and we've also done an analysis, statistical analysis, that will show based on previous trends where this performance will go to. And we are satisfied with this analysis and the trend line that we've chosen for the analysis of the IRP 2023. We know obviously there's efforts like the Energy Action Plan, like I say, in order to help to improve the EAF, but we see how big of a challenge this is. It's a big challenge. It requires a lot of effort and resources, and hopefully this will be, this will come around and it will be sorted out at some point. But as things stand, this is one of the biggest challenges in the ESI today. Then technology costs and performance characteristics. These are new technologies. We've used some reports that are also being updated at this particular point in time. We've gotten a lot of comments on the costs and so on, but we've done benchmark with other publications just to see whether these costs are within range or not. And then the decommissioning plan, we know that because of efforts to try and ensure security of supply, Eskom is looking at what they call continued operation. This is basically for power stations that are earmarked to be shut down by 2030. But however, what we've used here does not consider continued operation for those power plants. And then also, whilst we're on the decommissioning plan, because this goes hand in glove with the air quality standards that we know that the DFFE have put a process, because a number of these current Eskom power plants do not comply with Air Quality Act or the so-called minimum emission limits. And according to the law, then if they don't meet by a certain time, and this has been extended like twice already, then those plants must be shut down. Otherwise, then they are in contravention of the law. And we know Eskom, the minister of DFFE, had issued a decision 2 years or so ago, and Eskom appealed it. Should then put in a panel that will then, we believe this month, will be making recommendations to her, and hopefully there will be a decision on that. And then commissioning of new capacity. I've spoken about the challenges associated with the grid and so on. And then there's many other input parameters that are considered. We know the two horizon approach. The first horizon is both are critical in their own right. The first horizon looks at the period up to 2030, but this is the one where you're looking at all initiatives in the country, and they're all at different stages, especially on the supply side. And this formed the bulk of the analysis of the scenarios that were analyzed for Horizon 1. And it basically shows you to what extent load shedding can be, or power insecurities can be addressed. Then Horizon 2 basically speaks to evaluating different policy guiding principles, just to see exactly what then would constitute a future mix for South Africa, now, because you need to evaluate all possible positions that you know of, so that ultimately when you come up with a final plan, you are able to answer questions why you consider this or not consider that, So yeah, I think that was the primary objective around it. And these were meant to be exploratory in nature. And I don't think the department at this particular point in time has got a position about which one should be followed like. Right, these are the scenarios that are made up of the different, like I said, initiatives that are in the pipeline by both business and government. I will not go through every one of it. So 5 scenarios were analyzed for Horizon 1, and we've noted their outcomes and their impact, and we've seen all of them, but one. We see that the improvement of security of supply in the ESI is going to be extremely difficult, unless if certain things happen. Should the Eskom plant performance continue on the current trend. However, if that performance of these plants improves, then we see an immediate improvement of security of supply to the point that you can start having different discussions. But that must then be balanced with whether you'll be able, when this happens, whether you'll be able to meet NDC targets or not, right? And it depends to what extent. All right, and then Horizon 2 is also about 5 scenarios or pathways that were analyzed, like I said, based on different guiding principles and other things that we know about the power sector. 2 of them have got to do with the transitioning of the power system to from high to very low carbon intensity of the power system. And we look at 2 different ways of doing this based on trends out there. And then there's a least cost that was done, which is called the reference plan. And from what we've seen, it's very difficult for any jurisdiction across the globe to implement a least cost plan. What we've seen, there are other drivers as to why different jurisdictions, for example, would prefer a certain choice of technologies for their power system. And then, I won't even talk about the observations, but at length. But what we noted is that for Horizon 1, unless Eskom EAF improves the way they say it will, load shedding will be still be something to talk about. It will remain. Otherwise, if it doesn't, all the initiatives that we've looked and also taking into account grid availability, load shedding, as roughly saying, will not be able to get rid of it. And then, but unless in the later stages, if you bring in capacity that has got high utilization, because then it means when plant fail, we need to understand that when the current fleet, if any of it fails, you need to replace it with capacity that can mimic that performance, right? And a lot of the options that are on the table are not able to do that. Right, and then as far as emissions are concerned, all is good. I don't think there's anything that is being violated. The NDC, we speak about several interventions that can be taken in order to do this. I will not bore you with this. And then for Horizon 2 also, the certain things that we've noticed, that we've also shared in the report, but that high decarbonization, for example, of the power sector, even in the long term, will definitely require some serious thoughts. And you must also take into account that, especially the options that are on the table for decarbonization, we did not actually evaluate to a greater extent grid support services and ancillary services that then will also further add a different dimension to this. Our view is that the system operator will then obviously be in a position to can express a view based on the analysis that they would have done, because it will be difficult for us to talk to this part. But other than that, it's we've seen that also. If you extend the power stations that reach end of life after 2030, how that will result in high emission, CO2 emissions and other local emissions. And that pathways that have got technologies that have got high dispatchable characters actually improve security of supply. Chair, I think to cut a long story short, where we are now, we are at the public input stage where we're inviting comments on assumptions, scenarios, pathways, observations for both Horizon 1 and 2, and that we know that the minister has granted approval for because a number of stakeholders have been making requests that the process for public comments be extended by up to March, and this has been granted. Thank you, Chair.
Thanks, Sonoma. And I am sure that as you've now become used Sonwabo, there will be people who would like to engage with you and have questions for you. But I request the attendees of this session that you note down your questions for Sonwabo. I want to first give an opportunity to the invited speakers to make their inputs. Then after that is done, we have about an hour planned for interaction. That's when I will open the floor for your inputs to hear what you've got to say. So now let's start with the invited speakers. We've got 7 of them. The way we're going to do it, we're going to have them one after the other. We're going to start with, let me go to my agenda. We're going to start with Francesca. Francesca is the Executive Director of Southern African Faith Communities Environment Institute. So she comes from the faith side of stakeholders. Francesca, you've got the floor.
Good afternoon. Thank you so much. I appreciate being given the floor first, although I have chosen to focus my input in a very particular area. So I want to say I agree with probably most of civil society. That was going to be my opening ambit. But I've chosen to focus on particular areas that we at SAFC have worked on in the past. So you may well know SAFC from 2 examples of work that we've done. The first being the 2017 court case with EarthLife Africa. We joined EarthLife Africa to take the government to court over the R1 trillion nuclear deal, which was declared illegal and unconstitutional by the courts. And then last year, we also joined the Green Connection to call on government to implement the integrated energy plan legislation within the Energy Act. And that was also successful. And from the 1st of April this year, the government will need to start to work on its integrated energy plan, which I could say, I will start by saying that indeed we believe that the integrated energy plan is essential for any integrated resource planning. And we believe that that should have been done first. And it's been a failure in government to do so. And it means that factors beyond the modeling that we've seen here today are not being taken seriously enough into consideration. And those include development needs, affected communities, and others. And we feel that this IRP is not looking forwards, but in fact is taking us backwards. And there is thinking within the IRP, which we have not been able to understand. We're still analyzing it. So these are early inputs we would like to give. But our sense is that the energy mix is not going to serve people living in South Africa and not going to serve our climate objectives. So now I'm going to start my formal input. And if I can just be told when I've got a couple of minutes left, if I need to hurry up, please let me know. So we believe that an energy transition requires a new relationship with electricity. And we're not seeing that within this IRP, which is meant to determine energy allocations. Firstly, we did attend a consultation with the DMRE before, and there were a number of questions around the data sets. Some data has been released, but it's still very unclear about how the assumptions have been made and how we've reached the results that we're seeing. We believe this IRP is not ambitious enough, and it seems to have been rushed ahead of the IEP, as I mentioned just before. And there seems to be almost an ideological push suggesting a reluctance to move away from fossil fuels. We also want to state unequivocally gas and nuclear energy are not transition fuel options and should not be considered in any just energy transition. We don't believe the government is being proactive enough or visionary with renewable energies. And so it's placing this responsibility of transitioning more into the hands of the private sector, which ultimately will weaken these state-owned institutions. So we do not believe that that's a wise choice. I want to focus in particular, and this is notwithstanding the other issues with fossil fuels. There are many, and I'm sure they'll be covered very well by other speakers today. But I want to focus, please, with the time that I have on nuclear energy. We see in this draft that in this first horizon to 2030, the only nuclear energy that's been retained is the Cuba nuclear power station, the one nuclear power station in Africa. And they're looking to extend the life of the Cuba nuclear power station. I was just in Atlantis this weekend and presented to the National Nuclear Regulator on this issue. We have a submission there which people would be welcome to look at. We know from the energy planning around the Cuba's life extension that we do not have sufficient information on seismic studies, on key safety issues, on the costs of the upgrades that would be required to extend the life of Coburg by 20 years. And we also know from France, where they built Coburg, that they often only extend nuclear power station lives by 10 years if they pass the feasibility and the cost tests. And we've had none of that information, and yet we're being asked to approve the license of Coburg. And I feel very similarly about the IRP as I feel about the lifetime extension of Coburg. We're not given sufficient information. We are in the dark, literally, with load shedding. And this kind of energy planning is not going to get us out of the dark. And I think that's the most fundamental point. If there's a point to take away from today, the IRP is not sufficient. We can see that a number of the essential upgrades for Coburg have not been done yet. And the license expires mid this year. So we've made a detailed submission on this. There's both a PowerPoint and a technical submission where you can read more. But we have to say that the IRP cannot be saying that's promoting the least cost option in this instance or any of the others when we're flying blind in the cost of key aspects of future planned energy generation. In terms of Horizon 2 up to 2050, we have 5 pathways. Pathway 3 includes renewables and gas up to 2033. You don't need me to read all of that to you. But that pathway includes 4,000 megawatts of new renewable energy and additional nuclear of 14,500 by 2050. The IRP suggests that the renewable energy pathway is the highest cost compared with the others, which includes new nukes. And pathway 3 is costlier than these other pathways that are just that include nukes. So when we look at these calculations and we look at how these sort of ideas of greener coal and so on, we can't see the costs. So we're being told that one pathway is more costly than the other, but the rationale seems to be that renewables will be the most cost because of the generation capacity that needs to be constructed due to this unserved energy. Because it's not going to be able to, there'll be a supply side shortage, so it can't be be a reliable energy source. But for us, that links us straight back to some of the arguments we hear all the time with nuclear, which is this argument of baseload. Because renewables are intermittent, you need to have a different kind of capacity in order to achieve the output. However, we know that the construction of new nuclear is going to be even more capitally expensive than the renewal of Coburg, for example. So this suggestion that renewables are more costly is, quite frankly, I don't know how those figures were arrived at. If you look at Hinkley C in the UK and the kinds of costs that the UK is looking at and the extension of the plant construction costs and length, you can absolutely see that nuclear would not be in any IRP where you're serious about load shedding or keeping costs down. Nuclear is not a clean energy source, and it's not complementary to renewables. So we should not be seeing it there. There's also a reference made to these small modular reactors, which are, by the way, even more expensive than the large nuclear power plants. So it should be left out solely on that measure. But they're being presented as being flexible and capable of being deployed. But, experts from around the world, and in particular, Professor Steve Thomas, who's been studying SMRs for decades, they're still not a matured technology. In other words, it's a speculative technology. So there's no basis for the cost calculation that we can see that would make SMREs part of any kind of energy mix in the IRP. And I just want to emphasize again, nuclear cannot be seen as in any shape or form as approaching our needs in terms of load shedding. So our view is the IEP should have come first, and it should be there to guide the IRP. I think we'd see much more effective energy planning if that approach had been taken. We also want to say that we believe that there needs to be clearer funding for Eskom in terms of the needs of affected communities who aren't able to afford the electricity costs as they go up year on year. So much more attention within the IRP needs to be on issues like the feed basic grants for electricity. That's super important, and especially in terms of our development needs. We also think that there should be more emphasis on socially owned renewables. How do we decentralize our energy production? How do we open up energy access and clean energy and affordable energy?
Sorry, Francisca, yes. May you please draw to the close?
I will. Thank you so much. I'm just at the end, so that was very good timing. So what does that look like? How do we generate energy and income for communities? Well, we, from a faith-based organization, truly believe that the faith sector could play a very focal role in this. In terms of developing these socially owned renewable energies, you could put them on faith institutions, and we believe that this could be a way where we don't have to depend on the grid, but actually we can create energy stations that will really meet the needs of South Africans. Thank you.
Thanks a lot, Francisca. Thanks for your input. The advantage of being one of the first speakers is that you get a little bit more time than the last ones. So, but still, invaluable inputs there. I request that we proceed to the next input. The next input is going to come from the South African National Civic Organization, SANCO. Today, they are represented by their acting national organizer, Donovan Williams. You've got the floor, Donovan.
Thank you, Brian, and thank you as well for the representative from DMRE. We were worried when we realized that the integrated resource plan was published in the 4th of January, when most of us would not have taken time. But we acknowledge that maybe it was a ploy by the minister so that he can have this consultation on the 13th of February, so we can all wish him happy Valentine's Day for tomorrow. So we note that he has given us some chance, but maybe for reasons of love. I think the most important thing that we would want to register, and we speak on behalf of communities, the South African National Civic Organization, so we wouldn't claim to be in step with civil society, but in step with communities, in particular poor and working class communities, both urban and rural, across South Africa, that we welcome the plan. Of course, we wouldn't be able to agree with everything. We still need to look at it a little bit more carefully. But we especially welcome that we are still maintaining an energy plan and an energy cocktail that's integrated. To think that we would only use one form or one channel of energy would be slightly problematic for communities and in particular SANCO, because no single energy mix no single energy, be it renewables or anything like that, will be able to provide for all the energy needs of a country that is supposed to grow and is supposed to be developed and supposed to provide meaningful jobs and sustainable jobs for our people. And I think that's what worries us on the horizons and the overall horizons, to think that one day it will be carbon-free, completely carbon-free. No energy is carbon-free, even renewables, because of what is required to provide the resources for those renewables, be it solar, etc., be it the panels for solar or the turbines, etc. It still requires rare earths, it still requires a number of minerals. So therefore, to talk about carbon-free is an objective that will not be reached, and one that we find remarkable that it's even put there, and that's what bothers us, I think, a lot about the plan, is that we are tying ourselves to horizons that we can't see yet, and we need to be, we are cautioning on that. Particularly when we look at the type of financing and funding that is spoken about for the just energy transition. That concerns us. It concerns us that we could tie up our great-grandchildren and our great-grandchildren's grandchildren, for that matter, and we do not agree that that South Africans should be dependent on private companies or individuals for their energy needs. So we do not take these supposedly neutral and non-harmful words like independent power producers as being anything but private producers. We maintain that the production for energy for the people of South Africa remains the responsibility of the state, and they cannot delegate that responsibility to anyone else, or for profit, for that matter. As we have seen just recently, that you have a gas provider of natural gas in the city of Johannesburg, and it was given to a private company called Igoli Gas, and Igoli Gas, as a private company, has been cutting off gas users within Johannesburg, and claiming because they are a private company, they are not they do not need to follow the same rules as government. So that should be emblematic that what could happen when we are dependent on companies providing us with energy. They can increase the prices, they can decide that they're no more because it's not cost worthy enough or profit enough to be able to supply poor communities, and they could charge government an arm and a leg to provide energy to those. So that should inform us that the understanding of independent power producers must still be debated. We don't think it's something that must be just taken for granted because many make a noise on it, because they're upset with the state-owned entity Eskom and how it is run, or they are upset with government. This has to be looked at. It can't be 3 minutes. Sorry, Commissioner Mantashe, it cannot be. It cannot be. I will stop right now. I'm being serious, because the person before me spoke for 10, 15 minutes, and you're going to say, because I'm the second speaker, I must speak for 5 minutes. That cannot happen. I will honestly stop right now, Mr. Mantashe, and it'll be fine.
I'm looking at the clock, and you started at 37.
I was also looking at the clock, Mr. Mantashe.
Continue, please.
I will stop right now, and we'll say, as SANCO, we have not made a submission, because that will be incorrect.
Continue,
that
please,
would be
Mr. Donovan.
clearly that you cannot say because the first speaker spoke and therefore give more time, and then on a whim, without any science, decide that not even half the time, not even half the time, like 10% of the time. I mean, that's ridiculous, Commissioner. I would rather stop. If you're not going to let me give my input, I would rather stop, and you note it for the record that SANCO did not make a submission. I would honestly rather stop.
Mr. Williams.
Yeah.
Please continue.
Thank you, Commissioner. The matters on the energy mix, you've put down 4, and that is, and we agree with them. We agree with nuclear. We don't think nuclear should be taken off the table. Currently, right now, Egypt is building a nuclear power station with the assistance of the United States, in their government, but the power station is being built by Rostov, Russia, which was rejected later. Nuclear to be taken off the table, and we agree that it mustn't just be Koeberg, but nuclear as an energy source cannot be ruled out. And we would find that incorrect that it is ruled out in that way. We still maintain on hydrogen gas. Hydrogen gas is one of our most important sources. It should be looked at much more carefully, but you cannot just look at hydrogen gas on its own, because we could be a great source for hydrogen gas, because we have the minerals to be able to produce hydrogen gas in terms of the platinum group of metals that we have a large abundance of it. We expect the state to get involved in that sector in the mines itself, so that we're not dependent on mining companies to hold us to ransom on that. And secondly, we also expect the state to look at how do you rejig the value chain within the hydrogen fuel market, so that we can be able to enjoy that, so that there can be fuel stations that can provide hydrogen energy in that way. On the actual the methodology, the modeling that was used, it's very difficult for us to understand that modeling. We are surprised that it's not explained in a user-friendly way. But importantly, we want to know, why did you choose that modeling? What does it do? And who created that model? Because who created it is as important to us. It cannot be something that can be just wished away, because definitely speaking, the modeling itself can give you a scenario that is that can be conducive or more advantageous to certain sectors. I think that's quite important. And first, and then most importantly, is that we as a whole want to know, how do you in this period in particular deal with load shedding? That the integrated plan must set, by dealing with load shedding, you will be able to create a sustainable plan that can deal with the entire period that we are talking about. And this is what's not clear in the IRP. This is what concerns us. We would expect DMRE to be able to do that, but to be able to do that, we are tired as South Africans of not being told who's in charge of energy from the side of government. We hear the Minister of Minerals saying he's not in charge. We hear the Minister of Electricity saying he needs more authority, and so forth. So government, in particular the President and these ministers, need to be completely clear, so we know who to question and we know who to have the debate with. Thank you so much. And Commissioner, thank you as well for allowing me to conclude my remarks.
Thanks, Donovan. Let's proceed, colleagues. Our next input is going to come from the Black Business Council Infrastructure Portfolio Committee. Today, they are represented by their Vice Chairperson, Mr. Tlale. Mr. Tlale, you have the floor.
Thank you so much, Mr. Montana and colleagues. Good afternoon. We won't be long. We have started the process from our side of analyzing the IRP. And through that process, we have identified quite a few concerning issues on it. And from our side, I think it is important that we make those clear now, and maybe we'll also do that in our formal submission as well. One of those is really around the IRP missing out on an opportunity to correct what has always been happening in our country around a disconnect of the National Development Plan around mechanisms that are available to advance development of our own country. And this, we can see it quite clearly within the IRP, that there is no link or direct focus on the development plan and the development of our own country. And energy is an enabler. And this, the IRP is missing in linking that the IRP being an enabler, ensuring that there is a view towards growth of our own country. And it has only looked at resolving problems that we have with regards to load shedding, but hasn't really looked at initiating a process of growth. We appreciate that there is challenges that we are currently experiencing, but we shouldn't be pressured by the current challenges and sell our own future. And we know that there is major socio-economic issues that our country is experiencing, and the IRP is not addressing it. So we would like to see the IRP being a vehicle that ensures that the whole economy is taken up and in this whole process. With regards to the energy mix, we always believe that a balanced energy mix is important, and we would want the IRP to also inculcate that view as well. And that view is that as Black Business Council, we support nuclear, and no matter what anyone says that nuclear, we know that if you don't support something, you'll become selective in what you take as the truth and not the truth. We've seen Europe embrace nuclear. And that is being neglected. And yet, as the Black Business Council, we have embraced all technologies, renewables, we have embraced them. We have got projects that we're doing around renewables, but it is important that this country uses its resources that it has. We have failed to see the IRP taking into account what we have seen happening in Europe, where Europe, when it had challenges, it went back to coal so that they can deal with their socio-economic issues and avoid major challenges. And we are not seeing that in the IRP, that there is an opening available, that if there is major challenges, even those power stations that would have been maybe closed by that time, that is an opportunity to go back into them. And one of the other issues is that on the first horizon and the second horizon is around the modeling. There's a lot of reference on studies that have been taken into account, but we don't really know what has been really taken into account. And that is the confidence that we need from the DMRE to ensure that we clearly know who are the modelers, what is their qualification, what is the parameters that have been really put into the model itself, who owns the model, and where has this model been used? Because with that, we'll be able then to determine the ultimate outcome. Our approach is that this IRP must ensure that this country has got a growth perspective towards it, and not just look at resolving a situation that we currently have and only advancing the decentralization of energy in the country. And we believe there is space for the private sector, but our own government shouldn't then take out that whole responsibility of ensuring that there's energy security. So from our side, I think we believe that there's a lot of misalignment, and that the IRP would have been able to bring in that you would have a clean environment with social unrest. And that we don't want. We want a society that is able to grow and have an environment where there is enough energy for additional opportunities to be put in place. So, and I think one other issue that we have really had an issue with is that we don't see the impact and involvement of Eskom within the IRP itself. And that is a big challenge. And we have seen it because the IRP is really an instrument where you have got one major generator of energy, which is Eskom. But with the way that the environment with the energy structure is changing, that you have got now multiple energy generators, that scenario has got to be really taken into consideration. What impact does it have on the IRP itself within the first horizon and as well the second horizon? So we would like to see the IRP addressing really those issues on the technical side, being able to access that information around the modeling, because that will allow us to see what really is happening. And from the Black Business Council, we'll make a submission from our side on the technical nature of the IRP. But we are afraid that the context that the IRP is built on, it looks like it's an European document, which doesn't take into account the environment that we're dealing with, the need for electrification for certain areas, the need for using energy as an enabler to deal with the issues of unemployment, of poverty as well. So that is really important for us, that we want to see that. And the IRP must not be viewed as an instrument, and the way that we're seeing it, it's trying to run away from legal action. And we want the DMRE to be bold, to be able then to include the energy mix that will move this country forward. I thank you, Mrena Mantashe.
Thanks, Mr. Klale, and thanks for your inputs. I want to just bring to your attention that there's a chat that's getting populated. So you may make your comments in the chat box there. We will have, the Secretariat will have, will look at all that is written there and will make sense of what you've said there. Our next speaker is from African Climate Alliance. He is representing the youth. So he's there in the African Climate Alliance. He's the program manager and youth coordinator. His name is Gabriel Klassen. Gabriel, please take the floor.
Thank you. Greetings, everybody. My name is Gwede Mantashe. I'm a youth intersectional justice activist from African Climate Alliance and Project 90 by 2030. Firstly, a massive thank you to Commissioner Mbali Baduza, who was originally asked to represent the youth and as such took the time to engage with us. And having seen the need for meaningful youth inclusion and authentic participation, she recommended to the PCC that I represent the consultative voice of youth and young people today. Secondly, a thank you to the PCC for the space. And lastly, to all the young people that gave their time and effort throughout the consultative process. In the last 3 weeks, I have been engaging young people through formal consultative spaces in regards to the draft IRP 2023, these groups aged 17 to 33, and more informally with young people aged 14 to 16, through dialogue and discussion to understand their needs and wants based on a broken down description of the IRP. I've also engaged young people who have recently vocalized their stories and their realities, their harsh realities in frontline communities from Mpumalanga at the recent Open Secrets People's hearing on energy profiteers. The reason that this process was done and followed is because young people are not homogeneous. With youth ranging in South Africa from 14 to 35, the concerns of a 14-year-old are not the same of that of a 25-year-old, let alone a 35-year-old. The following is the summary submission of these consultations that have occurred. The draft IRP 2023 public participation process has had many issues. It has not been accessible. It has not authentically engaged young people in meaningful and fully informed ways, as is our right. It also strays from the global and national objectives needed in our energy space to reach a just energy transition. Young people in South Africa reject the current process and the content within the draft IRP 2023. We view the process as one that does not follow the recommendations of this year body, the PCC, the Presidential Climate Commission on Energy Pathways, nor the objectives laid out in the Just Energy Transition Framework, not to mention the lack of meaningful and fully informed consultation, I reiterate. The plans set out in the draft IRP 2023 are not only rejected by young people in South Africa, but by young people and youth consulted from across the continent in a recent online consultation about the draft with about 60 youth present, who all too well understand the decisions that South Africa will make will affect their own environments, livelihoods, and energy systems. The draft IRP 2023 does not have ambitious steps or action points to meaningfully achieve the objectives set out within the plan. Rather, it looks to increase fossil fuel investment. We do not understand or see the need to further investment in gas and oil, as noted in the draft IRP 2023, with baseload gas increasing from 3,000 megawatts in the IRP 2019 to 7,000 megawatts within the current draft. It has been stated by experts and even by those who see the need for gas peaking that beyond what we have existing, we do not need more gas production and exploration. The slowdown of decommissioning of existing coal-fired power plants without the regard for environment and livelihoods of communities is something to be concerned about, as well as the slowed down rollout and the lessened rollout of renewable energy that was forecasted in the IRP 2019. We as youth are not anti-development in our call for a just energy transition from fossil fuels. In fact, as one of the biggest unemployed demographics in South Africa, we would call our leaders to meaningfully engage us as well as labor to seek ways to transition not only from fossil fuels to a non-monopolized renewable energy, but also ways to transition workers in the coal value chain into renewable energy sector and other sectors within our economy within a just manner. With the draft IRP's clear call and push for a 20-year extension of the current license for Koeberg Nuclear Power Station, and the call for a new build of nuclear, young people raise the concern that it is not safe. This noted in a recently unredacted safety case where 14 safety concerns were identified and listed about the current power station. The unredacted safety case only coming forward following PIA from civil society. This bears a problem when it comes to transparency and governance. Why have these things been redacted? It is also not, shall I say, cost effective or the least cost in any scenario, with current extension being forecasted to cost around 20 billion, noting that this quote is from years ago and does not reflect existing costs based on inflation. The concern around waste has yet to be addressed, with radioactive waste also being classified as spent fuel, not having a long-term solution or plan beyond storing the low-level waste in a community outputs in the Northern Cape, and not to mention the lack of planning for the high-level waste that is currently still being stored in the coolers at Koeberg Nuclear Power Station here in the Western Cape. Beyond these points, young people see the need for an integrated energy plan before an updated integrated resource plan can come into effect. Why the government is clearly trying to rush the process of this draft integrated resource plan 2023, when they know that as of April 2024, the IEP is set to be put forward and taken into motion, it's unknown. Thank you.
Colleagues, we seem to have lost Commissioner Brian Mantlana. Please bear with us while we get him back.
Good afternoon, everyone. I think because good afternoon, everyone. I'm Simpiwe Ngwenya. I'm a program manager in the mitigation team of the PCC. We can continue to wait for Brian, but I think the next speaker is ready, and so she can continue. Our next speaker is Ms. Wandisa Palmer, and she's the Executive Director of the Center for Environmental Rights. Over to you, Wandisa.
Thank you, Simpiwe. Good afternoon, everyone. Simpiwe, I'm hoping to borrow the 2 minutes from Gabriel, who finished right on time in his presentation. Thank you for this opportunity, Simpiwe, and to the Commission to address you this afternoon on the draft IRP of 2023. Although I could not claim to represent all corners of civil society here today, our input has been widely circulated for comment amongst a wide range of civil society groups and networks. Among civil society groups, there is a sense of concern and disappointment, as it is clear that this draft IRP would not address the electricity supply shortage, would not represent the least cost options, nor would it promote health and the well-being of the country and its people. As such, the plan is fundamentally not fit for purpose. I will go into some key objections, but there are more. Firstly, from a procedural justice point of view, a policy with such far-reaching implications, including multi-decade procurements, running into trillions of rands, health, water, climate, environmental and other social impacts, and electricity price impacts, warrants the highest standard of public engagement and transparency. As South Africa, we have access to both high-quality data and modeling, and we should use this to our benefit. The TMRE must make available all documents relating to costs, lead times, fossil fuels issues, and fossil supply issues and externalities relied upon. Additionally, DMRE has indicated that curtailment was omitted from the modeling, and the plan should be subject to transparent remodeling and re-release at an appropriate time. Moreover, as a public engagement process, online consultations are not inclusive enough. To build confidence and trust, the DMRE must conduct proper and meaningful public participation processes around the country once an acceptable plan is released. The foregoing notwithstanding, colleagues have already touched on this, Francesca and Gabriel in his presentation. We record that this entire updating process is premature, as the IRP must be informed by the Integrated Energy Plan, the formulation of which is due to commence in April this year. Given the departure from the least cost principle, we have grave concerns about the plan's ability to address rising costs of electricity. The plan must do everything possible to facilitate the delivery of affordable electricity to millions of low-income households within the country. This alone must be motivation enough for the development and the adoption of a least cost IRP. Furthermore, the IRP should be promoting the development of socially and community-owned renewable energy, ensuring cost management and beneficial participation in the generation of this essential service. In the current draft of the IRP, compliance with minimum emission standards is described in passing as an issue in which balance will need to be found. It then goes on to propose measures which will perpetuate this harm without any further meaningful discussion or analysis of the costs involved, including the cost of pollution abatement, the cost of illness and the loss of productivity on the public health system, the cost on the economy as a whole, and the ultimate cost on lives lost. Given the High Court's ruling in 2022 that the toxic air quality on the Mpumalanga Highveld constitutes a constitutional violation, disregarding and even exacerbating air pollution would make the draft IRP vulnerable to court action. The socio-economic impact assessment that has been published in support of the IRP is incomplete. Health impacts and air pollution are not mentioned at all. Reference was made in one of the consultations to the so-called externalities report. This report has not been made available, and it needs to be made available. The proposal of new and extensive power generation from fossil gas as baseload or mid-merit supply runs counter to a broad consensus among many modelers and experts, including the PCC's own electricity planning recommendations and its underlying models. The economic risks and climate harms that would result from a systemic switch from one fossil fuels-based system coal to another, like gas, are unlikely to pass muster if evaluated fully and properly. Economic risks include stranded assets, relying on uncertain global market for fossil supply, and the CBAM type of carbon penalties. From a climate change perspective, we know that methane leakage from the supply chain cancels out any climate advantage that fossil gas has over coal, or may have over coal. As it pertains to coal-fired power, while it is a relief that new coal is not envisaged in Horizon 1, delaying the decommissioning of the existing coal fleet has many potential consequences and costs, and the information to assess these is not made available. We need to know the status of the existing stations in terms of the conditions that they are in, and we also need to know what the realistic cost assessments are in order to keep them running. The steady decrease in energy availability factor points to this being a real concern alongside the ongoing health, water, climate impacts, including transitional risks and the risk to access climate finance. The inclusion of the so-called clean coal in Horizon 2 is deeply worrisome. Carbon capture and storage is in no way a technology that can be relied on as being practicable in the foreseeable future. The about 10 on state-procured renewable energy in the draft plan would have significant negative consequences, including undermining critical initiatives such as the South African Renewable Energy Master Plan, which is designed to accelerate the desperately needed new local jobs and economic growth. In addition, effectively relying on the private sector to build renewables for itself, while alleviating demand, means that the power grid for the general public will be based on a more expensive, dated, and ultimately unreliable characteristics of fossil fuel generation, further exacerbating energy poverty and hindering development for millions. Regarding climate change mitigation, again, the plan is thin on the information on how the various choices would impact on GHG emissions. The plan claims accordance with our current NDC without analyzing the impact on future stricter NDCs, a fatal flaw given the need to progressively reduce emissions towards zero by 2050. It is to be noted that the top end of the range of our current NDC is still deemed insignificant to meet the Paris Agreement objectives relating to limiting warming. It also disregards the sectoral emissions targets, which will be set after the promulgation of the Climate Change Act. Chair, in summary, civil society groups have grave reservations about the draft IRP as published for comments. Would like to see an energy plan that is developed in a transparent and a consultative way, that relies on the best modeling and evidence that we have, that promotes clean and affordable, reliable electricity for all, at the least cost to the state. We therefore ask the Honorable Minister to give serious consideration to a thorough revision of this document. Thank you.
Thank you, Sisi, and thank you for your inputs. I want to apologize to all of you that I had to change power sources. I forgot the time, it was 2 o'clock. So I had to change my power sources. Apologies for that. I propose that we proceed with our next input. We now have 2 more inputs. Then we're gonna open the floor for your for you to comment on this process. Our last 2, the first one is going to be from Labour, from the Federation of Unions of South Africa, FEDUSA. Today they are represented by their Vice President in the section of development, Commissioner, who is also my colleague in the Commission, Commissioner Jack Hugo. Jack, you've got the floor.
Chair, thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, let me start by welcoming the engagement today and the extension for comments to the 23rd of March on this draft IRP. I am no way representing Labour in totality, but express views in general here. Let's just remind ourselves, January 2024 being officially the warmest month ever internationally since 1850. We all need to act with speed in securing a greener future. Chair, if we look at energy security, it's the backbone of the economy, driving economic growth and transformation. As South Africa transitions towards a low-carbon economy, it can now carefully balance the energy mix with other pressing matters faced by our country, such as eliminating load shedding, unemployment. Can I just underscore that? Unemployment, poverty, inequality, and slow economic growth. We all understand and accept that the IRP in its various iterations is a dynamic and a living document, subject to updates based on technology advancements, economic factors, and environmental considerations. What we like in the latest draft IRP is the two horizons approach, which considers energy planning until 2030 and then beyond. What this allows is shorter term planning to deal with the immediate scourge of load shedding and an outlook that focuses on long-term energy planning, security of supply, decarbonization, and sustainable cost pathways. South Africa's commitment to a sustainable energy will and must shape its future energy landscape. We simply do not have the luxury to think otherwise. In order for any plan within the South African context to be successful, it needs to be coherent and speak to other plans or master plans that are crafted amidst the plethora of challenges within our beloved country. Without a focused approach, the deemed and actual successes will be very low. Labour was also part of the working group in crafting the draft South African Renewable Energy Master Plan. This plan at its heart is supported by 4 pillars: supporting demand, driving industrial development, fostering inclusive development, and building capabilities that encapsulate 9 high-level implementation elements prioritized by the SARM partners during the consultation process. However, if SARM, amongst others, does not talk to the IRP or even to the Just Energy transition or implementation plan, we will be missing a big opportunity. Misalignments might imply that there's no shared understanding within government about how the electricity crisis should be tackled and by when it should be resolved. There also appears to be a lack of intergovernmental collaboration on the future role of electricity in the economy as a whole. Let me just quickly highlight some issues. Load shedding has become part of our lives. In 2023, we saw 6,947 hours of load shedding. The worst year ever. Nearly 80% of the time we had load shedding. And in 2024, to date, we've already seen nearly 856 hours of load shedding. The Energy Action Plan that was mentioned previously today as well, announced by the President in July of 2022, had 5 key objectives. And I reiterate, July of 2022. We're but a few months away from July 2024. Number 1, fix Eskom and improve the availability of existing supply. Number 2, enable and accelerate private investment in generation capacity. Number 3, fast-track the procurement of new generation capacity from renewables, gas and battery. Unleash, and point number 4, unleash businesses and households to invest in rooftop solar. And then 5, finally, fundamentally transform the electricity sector to achieve long-term energy security. I'm going to repeat that, to achieve long-term energy security. Is the 2023 IRP strong enough on the points that was developed amidst this energy challenge? The reason Sona also outlined the President's vision for more renewable energy to prioritize a secure supply of electricity. Load shedding in South Africa has had significant effects on the economy, affecting various sectors, unemployment, and overall growth. It had a negative impact on GDP, had a negative impact on our mining sector, had a negative impact on our agriculture. Overall GDP for the next year is predicted to be below 0.8% because the negative impact of load shedding has an impact of around 2.1% quarterly. We are concerned that the latest IRP does not focus sufficiently on the current energy shortfall. A plan is only but successful when the ultimate aim and purpose is reached or achieved, which is clearly not the case with the current IRP. Will the IRP 2023 be different? We appeal for more evidence-based policy making that is about making decisions based on knowing with an estimated degree of certainty what works, at achieving which outcomes for which groups of people, under what conditions, over what time span, and what it costs. Question is the draft IRP 2023 strong enough on the just transition elements that is close to labor? And it includes things like jobs, energy poverty, skills, energy access. We are the opinion it's not. And Chair, with that, I thank you.
Thank you, Jack. We're now moving on to our last invited input. After that, I'm going to open the floor for inputs by the people that were not invited to make the prepared inputs. So our last contributor is going to come from Business Unity South Africa, BUSA. And today they are represented by their Environment and Energy Manager, Mr. Happy Kambule. Happy, you've got the floor.
All right, thanks, Commissioner, and I'll try to be brief because some of the comments that have come out reflect what I would have also liked to state. I think from our side as Business Unity South Africa, we are undergoing the process of analyzing the IRP a little bit more deeper, and we are quite encouraged by the department's decision to increase or rather to extend the public participation process. We think it is quite important that we are given enough time, and we do welcome the current extension, and we wanted to commend that. The second thing, Chair, I think, which is quite important, and I want to piggyback on what Commissioner Hugo stated, and these are the two critical areas, at least top line, is that there seems to be a lack of government coordination, or at least alignment. We need to hear the same voice, and if the basis of any other information regarding energy security, regarding how we're dealing with load shedding or any of the price paths that will be associated with the final decisions around the IRP will come after this particular IRP, then this process will be very important. But if we're going to revert back to a situation where we are confused depending on who's speaking from government as to where we are going and how far we are from arresting this perennial problem of load shedding, then it won't be a process that is worth anything, really. Because even as we speak, the electricity supply industry, in fact, the whole industry is undergoing a massive change. There's a transformation that is occurring, not only from people who are producing electricity, whether it's Eskom and the different other players, but also from people who are consuming this valuable energy source, which is electricity. So the IRP needs to make that clear, and it also needs to take that into account. So, for example, it doesn't seem to actually fully appreciate the kind of transformation that is about to happen as a result of the Electricity Regulation Amendment Bill, which is already by far one of the more transformational type of legislations that we've seen within the electricity supply industry. It doesn't really leverage the fact that we've got a Schedule 2 limitation that has been removed around what happens when you are a private producer and you want to self-generate, whether or not you need certain types of regulatory processes and approvals, which also indicates the amount of time as well as the cost of actually going through that particular investment decision that you have made. It doesn't really reflect that in an accurate way, nor does it actually reflect it in a way that it is consummate with what is occurring within the market or within the sector as well. And then obviously, as Commissioner Hugh has indicated, that look, there are other policies that impact the IRP's development, and they need to be included. And I think previous IRPs, as much as we've had problems with them or we've had critiques of them, they were finalized. But even in their development, you were able to understand what is considered by the department, or by government, at least in this case, what is the most impactful policy. So you'd have a hierarchy of policies that it would say it has no choice but to consider, and this is the way it has considered them, and the secondary and tertiary types of policies that would be applicable, and the manner in which it has kind of considered them. And it doesn't do that, which is also just one area of a gap. I think a concern that we do have, and it's not really about the amounts that are attached to each technology, but the kinds of assumptions that are coming in there. South Africa is facing a gas supply cliff, and basically what that means is that the secondary market of the gas sector is probably not going to be getting the kinds of volumes that it needs to get, or that it currently gets, because of the primary user of gas who brings it into the country, being Sasol, has made a particular decision from 2026 and going forward. So it doesn't take that particular decision into consideration, nor does it take the fact that we've got different reserves that are available and those that aren't available. And each of those, depending on the decision that you make, have cost implications. So the price path associated with the particular decisions and the types of scenarios is also something that is largely missing. And Chair, I think largely from a business unity perspective, we wanted to see an IRP. And just stepping back to the initial comment, we wanted to see an IRP that is looking at the future, right? It addresses the primary problem, which is load shedding, and doesn't produce load shedding as an output of its own, of the actual modeling process, but it is something that it needs to address, just like one of the challenges, the conditions that it is facing, just like having to achieve 99% or 100% energy access as part of the conditions of why you're developing the IRP. Load shedding should be seen as one of those and not necessarily an outcome. But then to that, we should be having an IRP that says, if we're going to have a multi-market, what does that look like? Because if you have a multi-market, you're not going to tell the producer or the solution maker exactly what to build, because you are not the one who's bankrolling that particular decision. That decision is being bankrolled by the solution provider. What we necessarily need is a systems approach to the IRP and not a technology-based one, where we basically say that this is what indicatively it may look like if you were to take certain considerations and decisions in mind. But overall, this is the amount of electricity we're going to need, because we want to achieve address the triple challenge. We want to achieve decarbonization. We want to address energy access. We want to address a number of other issues. But because of bringing all that together, this is the amount that we need. The quantum is X. When you get to the point of selecting the technologies, you leave that to the solutions makers, because those are the ones who will come based on the criteria of decision making at the time. The IRP needs to start to look at that kind of situation, because we are no longer in a system where you make one decision about whether or not you're going to build nuclear or you're going to build solar, and then basically have everything else within the public procurement system and within government fall in line with that particular decision, because we are no longer in a world where we have one utility that owns everything from generation up until to distribution. So that needs to be taken into account. And the IRP, if it takes that into account, will not be the same and will not necessarily also be presented in the same way. And then just to say, Chair, in closing, the question of affordability is quite key. And not only affordability in terms of what the end user pays, but also what is affordable for companies and the private sector. Because we are subject to a lot of other constraints that other society, members of society, including other countries, don't have. South Africa is going to be subjected and is in line to be subjected to the carbon border adjustment mechanism. And the EU is not the only region that's thinking about something like this. There are other regions that are thinking about something like this, because it also fits in with their own nationally determined contributions. So the IRP needs to play in concert with the green taxonomy that we have and the overall desire of ensuring that we are competitive and that we are able to access the key markets that we produce, the many goods and services that we produce. Other than that, Chair, I'd like to end there so that we can get into the discussion. Thank you, Chair.
Thanks, Puti. Thanks, Happy. And I want to thank all the invited speakers this afternoon. What I liked about your inputs was the focus the topic we're discussing today, it is very tempting to be broad, simply because it has got a number of interlinkages with many aspects of natural resource management. But your comments, your inputs, your contributions were all focused to the document that we are looking at today. So I first want to give the opportunity to Usonwabo and just hear his reflections based on what you've heard this afternoon. Before opening the floor, I want to give Sonwabo a few minutes. You've had 7 different inputs that are very rich. Your reflections, please.
Yeah, yes, thanks, thanks, Commissioner. There's the DDG actually. Maybe she must go first. Thank you.
Yes, please come in, Ms. Ndogos.
Good afternoon, and thank you, Chair, for the opportunity. Firstly, let me apologize. I joined late and I've been kicked out of the meeting several times. We really are struggling with connectivity in the office. I don't know what's happening. The network is just not good. For the bigger part, I listened to the comments. And firstly, I think thank you. We welcome the comments. Thank you so much for the comments. Thanks to everybody. But I think the comments, when they are generic and sort of conclusive, conclusive statements such as this IRP will not address the challenges, it becomes a bit of a challenge for us to then look at how do we incorporate those comments, or how do we use those comments to enrich the document, because the whole purpose of the document being put out for public comments is so that we receive comments that will then help us enrich what will become the final plan for the country. So our appeal would be, if we could receive written comments that are specific to say, look into this area, consider comments like nuclear is not good, it's not really helpful, because we can't just then go to the document and delete anything to do with nuclear. Reality today in South Africa is we have Quebec. And Quebec is the cleanest power station we have in the country. That's a fact. Secondly, Quebec is the one power station that gives us the cheapest electricity per kilowatt hour in the country. Those are facts. It would therefore be irresponsible for us, all of us as South Africans, not just the policy department, to then say, just because some stakeholders are saying nuclear is not good, to then say we shut down that nuclear power plant tomorrow. Those are the realities we need to accept. Having said that, we motivated and requested a minister to approve that we extend the comments period, because we believe that granting that extension would then allow South Africans to give us those, comments that critique the actual document, the contents of the document. So we're appealing for that. The last point then I want to make is, we have received a request for more data to be published. We've shared a lot, we've put quite a lot of data that we used on our website, so that people are able to see our data sources and do their own analysis. And just this morning, we also had a meeting where we were saying additional data we are going to be packaging and releasing and putting on the website, so that we are able to receive a comprehensive comments. And I think, I don't think there were any questions or comments that are of a technical nature that really needs Sonwabo to comment. Because Sonwabo would comment on technicalities around modeling. How did you model this? Where was what was your source of data and all that. So yeah, I think this would sum up our comments. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Dr. for that contribution. Okay, so the way we're going to run this, I take it that the guidance we are receiving from Sisindokozo is that I need not call Sonobo for input, and I will follow that guidance. So please raise your hand so that I can invite you to speak. At the moment, I do not see any hand on my side. Simpiwe, please assist me if you are able to see any hand from your side. Oh, there are 3 hands. I'm looking at the wrong list. There are 3 hands actually that are up there. Apologies, I don't know how the sequence of them coming up. So I'm gonna ask them the way they appear in front of me. First, we've got Kulekani Mahlangu, and then we've got Muhlatsi, and then we've got Nkosinati. So let's start with Kulekani. Please come in, Kulekani, and introduce yourself before you make your input so that we record your affiliation. Kulekani, you've got the floor.
Yes, I don't know if I'm audible.
Yes, sir.
Okay, thank you very much. Now, I am Kulegani Mahlangu, Director of Afro Rebel Information and Solution Support Agency, based in Mpumalanga, Middelburg. Firstly, before I start, I'd like to applaud Chief Carrington and Wandisa for their input, core inputs. And then I would like to make my inputs regarding the presentation made by the first speaker. Now, I'd like to start to say that most of the inputs that were made actually talk to the fact that the IRP is not actually descriptive enough of its core vision and inputs. So that means the IRP is not actually talking to what it intends to do. It is just guidelines, and it doesn't actually instate the hows and the objectives. Now, this also takes me to the fact that I think that most of our political leaders, business leaders, and all the people within actually the environment of development actually forgetting the fact that South Africa is actually just 28 years of freedom. So South Africa is basically young. So we are all just at the stage of learning these environments, from the political environment, civil society environment, the business environment, and the community environment included. So with that having said, if we would look at the environment of South Africa, the current social, economic challenges and impacts that we have, so we are still workers and buyers in our own country. So we are not within the industries of producing and selling. So if we are to talk about the guidelines within the IRP, so the IRP expects us as the people to actually be the ones who take the step forward into achieving the vision of the IRP, which means that it is expected that as communities, we venture towards social ownership models of building our own community-owned mini power grids and power generation plants. So if we are to instate that it is within the capacity of the youth to actually be able to look into such information, as if we would look at the business environment, we have people who are about 40 years old and going upwards who are within the small medium enterprise industry. So which means that we have about 2 generations lacking participation within the industry of the business sector. So if we were to talk about social ownership models, we don't see the part where the IRP instates how it is willing to assist in terms of the centralizing or the localization of the pathways to new energy systems. So we are talking about technical and technological technologies and performance plans, of which our institutions, our current institutions that are based here in South Africa as a whole, don't have the necessary capacity of actually educating our students and our learners and our pupils of these new systems that we are to transition to, which brings a more factor of how are we going to capacitate ourselves as South Africa in actually building this new energy sector and these new energy industries. So we are looking at the current vision of 2030, from now to 2030, and from 2030 we are going to 2050. So this means that there is still a need to actually further the research and the study of these new and advanced technologies. So in terms of ourselves, capacitating ourselves with these necessary transitional requirements, so we're going to talk about the decommissionings of these mines, and we're going to talk about the decommissioning of these power grids without looking at the servicing requirements of these decommissionings. So these requirements require that we have certain skills to actually decommission these mines. And if we look at the capacity of our business environment, we don't have any people here within the country of South Africa that can meet actually the demands of a decommissioning of these power plants. So we are to be dependent on external sources and external businesses to actually assist us with the decommissioning of these processes. At that same time, forgetting the fact that the transitioning itself is a loan. So the energy transition is dependent on a loan to actually transition to these more efficient technologies. So if we're to transition through a loan, and at the same time using external resources and researches to actually facilitate the study, it is a loss if we look at the economic and the social environment, as it will not be beneficial to us, because everything will just go back outside and it won't be more productive or sustainable. And then there was Mr. who talked about the AQMP, and he instated that if these plants and these mines do not meet the current standards of the AQMP, they are to be shut down. Now, that shows to me that there is a lack of research and adequate information, or maybe there is a lack of understanding the impact of just closing down the mine or just shutting it down, as there is a risk matrix which must be looked at of just shutting down a plant. I would like just to cut it there. Before I cut it, I'd like to include the fact that this air quality, we have local standards to international standards. So the DMRE itself, I would like to know if maybe have they maybe structured any implications or compliance control mechanisms in terms of the information and the compliance control of the air quality management in addressing air quality from local standards to international standards, as to how are they planning to actually monitor and ensure. I am living in Middleburg, and we are close to Columbus here, which is a steel production plant, and there is times whereby there is load shedding and it's at night, and they're just burning the steel there and the sky turns red. So in terms of compliance control, like I don't know what are the plans. So if they're just to shut down the plant just because it is not not in compliance with its standards, then what happens to all that economic activity that happens there? Thank you.
Thanks, Kulegani, and thanks for that broad input. I noted that you had questions also for DMRE in your inputs. I'm going to ask Ngosinati, and then after Ngosinati, I see Motlatsin is not here anymore. After Ngosinati, it's going to be Alex. Ngosinati, are you there? Don't see Ngosinati anymore on my list.
Alex is Ngosinati.
Okay, let's have Alex and then Andile after Alex. Alex?
All right. Sorry that the others are having troubles with their connection, but anyway, it's Alex Lanfurner here, General Secretary of the Climate Justice Coalition. We're a coalition of over 60 member organizations made up of community-based organizations, non-profit organizations, trade unions, and the like across the country. We've been engaging with our members around this integrated resource plan, and I must say the overall sense is that we're dismayed and we see it as a large step backwards, particularly the very significant scaling back of renewable energy and ambition on that front. Even the IRP 2019 was woefully unambitious, and this goes even further back than the IRP 2019. And I think seeing the IRP scale back, state-led renewable energy so significantly speaks to this question of ownership that the previous speaker was talking about. Because while the state is retreating from renewable energy, the private sector is moving very rapidly towards it, thanks to the liberalization of our market. And the reason the private sector is moving towards it is because it is the cheapest, the most affordable, and the most reliable, and the quickest way to bring new energy on board. So the private sector can, and those that are wealthy and affluent can shield themselves from the impacts of load shedding. And meanwhile, the state is trying through this IRP 2023 to lock us into an energy future that is more polluting, more unreliable, and more expensive through forcing in these more, outdated polluting technologies from the previous century. And so what we have in essence is a deepening of energy inequality through the IRP, where the private sector will dominate in renewables and cheaper, superior technologies, and the rest of the public will be stuck with, these unreliable polluting technologies that take years and years to come on board. And so they will be stuck with a flailing Eskom. And so this really is a plan that locks us into deep energy inequality, and that takes us very far backwards on our progress on renewables, on clean technology, and on energy justice, right? And so we as a coalition are quite dismayed about this. And so, during Human Rights Day, during that week, we will be protesting this plan. Because we do see it as a violation of our rights to energy that is clean, safe, and affordable, a violation of our rights to energy access, and it's also a violation of our right to an environment that does not harm our health and well-being, which this does through, locking in coal for additional decades, coal that is already, well past emission standards, and also trying to lock us into gas for decades to come. And so, yeah, I think you will see us not only making public submissions, but you will see us on the streets protesting this plan. Thank you.
Thanks, Alex. Just checking, Gosnati, are you back?
Yes, I'm back, Commissioner. My mic was invisible at that time, so can I jump in now?
Please.
Okay. Gosnati Kambule from Grassroots for Climate Action. I got 2 points. One, I'm just flagging on the point that has been keep on coming up by the speakers who have made presentations, that this plan seeks to undermine or not consider the other existing plans which are meant to assist such plans, like the electricity recommendations that the PCC have. I'm quite sure that they have submitted that document to the DRME, and they have it on their position. And I mean, such work, it is backed by science. I understand they have their own way of doing things. I understand their presentation, they have their horizons and that technical information what they have. But what I understand that the information that is on that recommendations document can assist them in planning, because it was done in an open manner through a multi-stakeholder consultation process. So I'm flagging the point that they should consider these such plans, and like your South African Renewable Energy Master Plan. And then Sonwabo raised 1 point about high carbon utilization technologies being is the only solutions to drive us out of the current energy challenges. But at the same time, he is speaking about us being in line with our NDC target and net zero target. So I'm quite confused because climate scientists and some studies are saying that we are off track in meeting our NDC targets and net zero targets, or due to financial constraints and other reasons. So just a point of clarity on what he's talking about with him pushing for high carbon neutralization technologies and us being on track with meeting our climate targets. Thank you.
Thanks,
and at some point, I might be not able to hear the answers because my computer is flat now. It can go off anytime due to this to their problem. So thank you, Commissioner.
Yeah. Thanks, Dosnat. I hope your computer hangs on. I've got Andile, and then I've got Happy and Mandla. Andile Mlambo, please introduce yourself. Come in, buddy. Andile, can you hear us? It looks like Andile cannot hear us. We'll come back to Andile. Happy?
Oh, I'm
Please
here.
come
I'm here. Sorry, Chairperson.
Continue,
Yeah,
Andile.
to be unmuted. It's Andile speaking from Grassroots for Climate Action. So I wanted to go back to the point by the DG, because Sonabo was supposed to give just a feedback on other speakers, and then I totally disagree what she was saying, where I feel as civil society we're being bullied when she says this is how we must look at the document IRP. We must look line 1, line 2, and correct it as per their perspective. I totally disagree. I think we have the right to comment in a way that it affects us. If we feel that it is betraying the principles of the just transition framework, like if you know those justices, restorative justice, the distributive justice, and procedural justice, we have a right to comment on it, to say this document betrays everything that we agreed upon in the first place. We cannot be told to say, speak this way, not do this, so now we must not speak. So I wanted to be there and just clear that. Thank you very much.
I hear you, Andile. I think we're gonna take in some inputs, and then I'm gonna come back to Sis Ndogozo to comment on the inputs that are from the floor. So, but I note your comment. Let's have Happy, and then after Happy we'll have Mandla. Come in, Happy.
I'll just take the opportunity because the DDG did indicate to us that we should at least be more specific. So the one question, and it's really about understanding whether or not there was consideration of energy efficiency in developing or in the final production or output of table 1, because it's solely lacking, and I think it's one of the first IRPs where we don't have like DSM or energy efficiency specifically listed as something that's going to play a role, and that will have a procurement process or some version of an allocation. And then the second one is there's a number of analyses that has come out on the reasons why, and I'm not picking specifically on renewables or any other technology, but this is one way in which it manifests itself, is around the renewables allocations within table 1 seem to be capped. There's some curtailment of renewables as depicted on table 1. What was the reason behind that? I mean, what was it? Is it a reason of cost factors, or was it a technical reason? It would be good to get a sense as to why that occurred, because it will also inform the way in which we are able to respond on the IRP in our actual technical submission as well, which we will send in writing. And then the last one was there sensitivity analysis around the different levels of utilization of the gas power plants? I mean, there was a speaker earlier who spoke about peaking gas plants. So I think that's where it comes from, is that right now it seems that the preferred option, at least for the first horizon, is having high utilization of gas power plants. But we just wanted to get a sense if there was a sensitivity analysis that happened, or how was that considered in terms of the different utilization ranges that you can have for plants such as this. Over to you.
Thanks. Thanks, Happy. Let's take a few more comments, and then I'm going to hand over to Ntokozo for responses. We now have Mandla and then Mutio. Mandla Mugwe. Can you hear us,
Thank you, Chair.
Mandla?
Yes, can hear you. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Thank you so much for taking my query, my question, Chair. And this is going to speak directly to what Usisi Ntongozo said about the kind of input that you'd like to see. Because as much as there is should be robust debate around this proposition, this draft proposition, we need to find ways of making it better in terms of implementation that serves everyone within the country. I was a bit disappointed.
Sorry, Mandla. Sorry, Mandla.
Yes.
May you please tell us which affiliation you are with?
Oh, sorry. So I'm a researcher for Wits University, and I'm part of the School of Business and Economic Sciences. Yes. I was a bit disappointed not to see sections directly speaking to energy inequality, considering that we are well within 3 decades of economic dispensation, political dispensation. So many people still are underserved, have no access to electricity. I'm not even going to get into the politics of that. I really would have liked to see how, moving forward, we aim to directly focus on and have actionable steps in resolving that. One of my fellow speakers did also touch on the fact that externalities of these proposed plans are not considered. So we need to know early within this process what possible problems might occur and what we might be having to deal with from a, of course, socio-economical stance and the environmental impact that these propositions will have. Thank you.
Thanks, Mandla. Mutio, Brody. Can you hear us, Mutio?
Thank you, Commissioner. Can you hear me?
Yes, I know I'm not pronouncing your name correctly. Please help me.
Sure. Thank you. My name is Muteo Brody, and I am from Section 27, a public interest law center working on the rights to basic education and the right to access to healthcare. Commissioner, thank you again for organizing this meeting, and to everyone that has made their presentations today. Mine is not very long. Wandisa in her presentation and Alex in his comments also touched on the health impact of IRP, and IRP has very little engagement with the health impact of some of its decisions. You look at the IRP itself, and it speaks about a balance needing to be struck between energy security, the adverse health impacts of poor air quality, and the economic costs associated with plants shutting down. But it seems, well, according to our reading, as if that balancing exercise is just lip service, because there's no real sort of engagement about what the impacts are of poor air quality on health. You further look at this socioeconomic impact assessment, and even there, very little is said about the impact on health. And so, Commissioner, I think this is something which is very, very, very concerning for us as an organization working on the health rights and the healthcare system. And yeah, safe to say that we're going to be making detailed submissions on this IRP, but that is one of the key concerns that we have identified, whether really there's been any consideration or engagement of what the health impacts of the decisions in IRP 2023. Thank you.
Thanks, Mr. Mugwed. I see Nompumelelo has her hand up. Nompumelelo, please come in.
Sanibonani.
Yebo, sis.
Okay. Igama lami uNompumelelo from G4CA Gauteng Orange Farm. Mina nje ngithanda ukukhuluma nje izinto ezimbili ezincane sikhuluma IRP, but at the same time futhi kubuye kufakwe sibe kube khona nabo just transition la kuthiwa khona no one must be left behind. Kodwa ke the way ngibheka ngakhona ukuthi kwi-IRP akukho la thina bantu emalokishini e-Orange Farm la sibalwa khona ezinye nezinye izinto abazenzayo. It's either zoba online, akukho ukuthi bafike emphakathini, akukho ukuthi bachazele umphakathi ukuthi kwenzakalani umphakathi ukuthi nawo wazi. So ke sihlangana kanjani sithini basibekele eceleni as if asi-exist. And okwesibili kukhulunywa mabekhuluma lapha nge-renewables bakhuluma ngama-IPPs lapho akukho abakhuluma ngako ukuthi as mina ngihlale Orange Farm umphakathi wase Orange Farm ukuthi wona into yawo izozibambela yona. Ngaso sonke isikhathi bakhuluma ngendaba zokuthi ama-IPPs uzothola ukuthi yinkampani zabantu abazimele. So thina as umphakathi ngabe sikhona nje ukuthi support amabhizinisi aloku eqhubeke aphambili. Ayikho enye into yethu as umphakathi kufanele ukuthi nathi sizenzele sizibambele yona ukuthi ikwazi ukuthi iye phezulu na. So ke ngokwami ngibona nje ukuthi okwamanje ayikakafiki la kufanele ukuthi kufike khona enye nenye into eyenziwayo ayikakafikeleli phezulu ngoba imiphakathi thina esisemphakathini thina kuyimanje esikhala nge-load shedding ngoba i-affecta thina kakhulu njengoba sila emalokishini, kodwa yonke into eyenzakalayo asifakwa kuyo. So ke if mhlawumbe bangabuyela emuva bakwazi ukuthi bazicabangisise ukuthi imiphakathi bangayifaka kanjani ngoba kumina ngumuntu nje bangake Orange Farm abahlula nje ukuthenga idatha. Bangaka base-Orange Farm ugogo wami ongakwazi ukufunda ongakwazi ukuthi yena abe online, zonke lezo zinto bake bazithathele ekhanda na. Ngiyabonga.
Thank you, Sisi. Siyabonga. Sikuzwile. Just a brief back of the envelope summary of what Unompumelelo Madubane said. She said that she comes from Orange Farm here in Gauteng. Her main point is inclusion. How are township communities included in the consideration in the development of the IRP? She indicated examples, for example, including IPPs. That IPPs makes a reference to private sector participation, but there's no explicit indication of how, for example, township communities are considered in the IRP. Nompumelelo, that was my weak attempt to translate to English your very rich input. I see the hand of Mbali. Please come in, Mbali. Bali Baduza. On my side, you appear muted. I think that's one of our
Thank you.
commissioners.
Yes, thank you. Thank you, Commissioner. I just want to touch on a question that a person from the chat has included around the implications for future generations. And this links to my question in relation to Section 24 of the Constitution. And I would like to read it, Commissioner, if you allow me. It
Please
says,
proceed.
everyone has the right to an environment that is not harmful to their health or well-being, and to have the environment protected for the benefit of present and future generations through reasonable legislative and other measures. To what extent, Commissioner, I'd like to ask, did the DMRE consider this provision in the draft IRP? Particularly the balance that must be done, that balancing exercise that must be done between the different interests, whether they are competing or not, and the different priorities of a diverse society like ours, in relation to future generations who have a body of rights as well. I would like an answer to that. Thank you, Commissioner.
Ngiyabonga sis. At this stage, I want to invite Ntokozo from DMRE and just to reflect on what we've heard to date. Please come in, Sister Ntokozo.
Okay, thank you so much, Chair. And thank you for the comments again. Ngicela ukuqala ngoSisi uNompumelelo. So, the issue that she was raising is around inclusive policy making. Ngicela ukusho ukuthi IRP as we speak today, because siya understand ukuthi fanele wonke umuntu abe involved, abe nayo indawo yokubeka uvo lwakhe. Si translateile to isiZulu, say translator to isiTsonga, say translator to isiTswana. And womathathu lama version sesiwa uploadile. I think we did this about 2 weeks ago. So I upload the website. Okay. My apologies. I've switched on my video. It's just that I have a connectivity issue. I've joined using a phone. We are struggling with the network. So si translate to lama languages amathathu. Senzela ukuthi umuntu okhuluma isiZulu akwazi ukuyifunda i-IRP, understand, ayiqonde, akwazi naye ukuveza izimvo zakhe. Nomuntu okhuluma isiTswana kanjalo nokhuluma isiTsonga. And sithathe lama language amathathu ngokuqonda ukuthi umuntu okhuluma isiSwati nomuntu othethe isiXhosa, if efunda i-document ebhalwe ngesiZulu, those are nguni languages aziqhelelene kakhulu. Mina ngiyakhuluma but ndiyasiqonda isiXhosa. Xa kuthethwa isiXhosa ndiyeva, ndiyakhona ukuva and ndiyakhona usifunda. Umuntu omTswana naye ungumTswana but mayefunda into yesiSuthu uyayi-understanda, nomuntu ongumSuthu mayefunda i-IRP yesiTswana uzokhona ukuqonda. Kanjalo nesiTsonga nesiVenda aziqhelelananga kakhulu. So ngaleyo ndlela nje bengi-highlight ukuthi sisiNompumelelo siyenzile imizamo yokuthi nibe accommodated nani, nikwazi ukubeka izimvo zenu, niyibuke i-document ngolimi lwenu enizokwazi ngalo ukuthi niqonde kahle. Then ngicela ukukhomenta again. I want to comment to a point that was made by Alex. Alex makes a statement. We will not only comment to this document, but you will also see us protesting on the streets, protesting this plan. Our plea, Alex, is that you comment on the document, and the whole point about us allowing South Africans to comment is so that you also show us our blind spots, right? You're able to say to us, we disagree with how you have modeled this part. We disagree with these assumptions for this reason. We disagree with how you've run sensitivities on this aspect. In that way, you are contributing to enriching the plan. Protesting a plan
From my side,
Doesn't
I've
seem-
lost Ntokozo.
Yeah, I can't hear her either.
I think the network is failing her, Chair. Maybe
All
let's
right.
give her a moment, yeah.
Yeah, let's proceed and allow her
I-
to reconnect.
Yeah, I got kicked out again. We are really
Sorry,
struggling.
please
Connectivity.
continue when Ntokozo.
So if you don't comment, you protest, you are denying yourself an opportunity to make your voice heard in the sense that you really give us something written to say, these are my areas of discomfort or my areas of disagreement with how you've done or how you've drafted the plan. And you allow yourself space for your inputs to be in the plan. Because at the end of the day, we will consider those inputs that come to us in writing, incorporate them, and publish a final plan. You see. So our plea is that let's rather take the approach of being a part of the conversation as opposed to it really, I'm lamenting this point, Chair, because it really pains me, because I always feel like you deny yourself an opportunity. You've been given an opportunity to make your voice heard. Use it wisely. Because whether you protest or not, we will finalize the plan and we will publish the plan, and it will be the one electricity plan for the country. So take this opportunity, come and talk to us in person, in writing. We stand ready to engage with you. And then I will allow Sonwabo to comment on some of the questions that were raised. For example, what sensitivities were considered, or what sensitivities did we model when we're doing the modeling work, and the whole utilization factor around gas, I think. And I know we looked at different scenarios and looked at gas with high.
I'm losing Ntokozo. Simphiwe, are you hearing her?
No, I can't hear her. I've lost her as well. She's back
Okay.
now. There she is.
I could pick it up because she was already asking me to comment, Chair.
Please, Sonwabo, continue.
If her network is fine, then she can continue if she wants to make further inputs, Chair. So, yes, Chair, there was a question that was asked about the utilization of, especially with regards to Table 1, where we also published a gas utilization that was coming from gas especially, and there's a reason why we did it. So gas, the way it operates, obviously we are a gas country and all of that, but the way gas operates in the technical work, I think, gives an indication of the system's health, whether it's insecure or not. So what we don't do is we do not cap we don't dictate how a gas must be utilized, but the system's requirements will then dictate how any option, not only gas, but how any options, for example, should be utilized, except for those like renewable energy that run on a profile. Those they run based on the forecast that has been done on the wind speeds and also solar irradiation. So you also don't provide a specific load factor. So we did not definitely cap the gas in terms of how it operates, but the high gas utilization, for example, tells us that the system requires an option that needs to be operating at high capacity factor. And then the renewable energy allocation in Table 1, there's a thing that it also is kept, and why it was kept. We do not have annual build constraints like in the previous IRP 2019 and 2010. The only constraint in terms of how much renewables were allowed are based on the grid. So we did an extensive analysis on the grid, and this was based on the TDP that was published by Transmission Planning, TDP 2023 to 2032. It basically details how the development of the grid was going to be evolve in terms of new projects and strengthening. And in it also tells you like how much new capacity could then be connected in the various aspects of the grid. Obviously, this will be also in different provinces of the country, but for renewable technologies, energy technologies like wind and PV, we know like there's the Cape areas that are preferred by the developers of those projects. So our analysis basically had to do with how much, for example, as the grid was developing and the starting position being the generation capacity connection assessment that was done in 2024. That is the one that was available, but we also understand that picture would not remain as static. As the grid would develop as per that TDP that I've mentioned, then it means more of these renewables can then be accommodated, because what is the point of prescribing or specifying a lot of technologies or capacity rather that you then cannot connect to the grid? That will then be would be misleading. And then also, it is not correct to say curtailment was not considered. Technically speaking, curtailment, only a draft has been published in January 2024 by Transmission that shows how much, if curtailment was to be done, control curtailment as they call it, how much additional wind specifically would be connected both in the Eastern and the Western Cape. And I think it totals about, by 2025, 3,700 and odd megawatts. So at the time when the IRP was done, the curtailment was not in place. A draft on curtailment was only released now in January. Definitely leading to the final plan that will then be taken in, it will then be considered. Like we had said in the public consultation, we will get in touch with the technocrats that then developed this curtailment addendum, just to understand the dynamics around it. Other than that, I'm trying to think what other question. Somebody challenged me also on let me see on my notes. I think there was a challenge on something that I had said.
Did you comment on the, there has been a number of, well, there's been several comments on air quality, the extent or the manner that air quality is considered in this draft?
Oh, okay, all right. Yeah, I think specifically, I think for this round of IRP, I think in the previous IRP, there were numbers that were available that then costed local emissions, which then speaks to air quality. These are noxious, SOxes, and particulate matter. And this information, I think for this IRP is not available. What we had then done was to cost, the externality cost that you see in the report is the cost of carbon that is based on the draft tax laws. I think the two documents were publicized. One speaking about the exemptions up to 60%, I think, of emissions for combustion of fossil fuels. It's specific to the electricity sector. And the other one also starts talking about the numbers, like in terms of dollars per ton of CO2, for example. So that is what we've utilized for this IRP. But when it comes to the actual, if you're now talking about the actual emission limits, for example, that are appropriate, which are then specific for a power station. They are specific for a power station because those differ based on atmospheric emissions in different parts of the country. So that's why they are power station specific. Those ones, the thing is, like I had said before, that DFFE is currently put a process that then is trying to address this challenge that they have with Eskom. So it would not help for the DMRA to overstep. Let's give the DFFE a chance to come up with a position, and then we see what it is, and it will then be taken into account, Chair. I don't know if there's anyone else, Chair, that I have not addressed. Is there any other one?
I'm going to let you reflect on this one whilst I'm taking James and Lufuno. There has been a recurring question about assumptions made in the document. Now, that's a broad statement. Perhaps you can pick out a section where you can point us to where you have confidence that you've made those assumptions clear. Maybe we are not reading well, and you can take an example of saying, well, in our approach, this is how we have, these are the set of assumptions that are considered in this specific section. But not now. Let's have James and Lufuno. James first and then Lufuno. Come in, James. Mr. Rila, can you hear us? Okay, it looks like we do not have James. Lufuno, are you with us? I had read in the chat an input from Lufuno. James, are you back? I'm not getting hold of James. I'm not managing to get Lufuno either. James, you're still muted on my side at least. You appear muted on my side. Okay, let's proceed. Okay. Yes, Lufuno, continue.
Yeah, I'm sorry, Chair, I couldn't unmute. I just wanted to ask if my question can be read in. I'm not in a position to talk long, but I'll be listening.
Great. Simphiwe, can you assist us with that, reading out the question of Lufuno now, please?
Yes, I can do that. I just can't see her question, Commissioner.
It's a longish input, but it's worth reading it.
Okay. So I can see comments from Commissioner Melissa and several others.
I just reposted it in the chat.
Okay, thank you. Okay, so I'm reading Lufuno's comments / questions. The 10-year review of the NDP was not very encouraging, but a very honest reflection of the persisting challenges. We remain the most unequal country in the world. I would like to request the MRE to advise on how much of the NDP has been addressed and has been addressed in the IRP. Pollution is a persisting issue that continues to violate Section 24 of the Constitution. And then the third one is, how is the IRP contributing to the reduction of pollution and creating a healthy environment? And then the next one is, how has the current IRP improved, or what improvements is it bringing from the 2019 plan? Within the same breath, how is it aligned to other frameworks or plans from other government departments like the DTIC and the DST?
Thank you. Thanks, Simphiwe. I see, Francisca, you've got your hand up. Please come in, madam.
Thanks, Brian, and thanks, everyone. I hope you can hear me. I have changed
we
my
can.
device. Thank you. I just wanted to bring up a process point in response to the DDG's inputs. I do appreciate the inputs. However, we're non-technical civil society input. And what we're asking for from the DMRE is to understand in an accessible way how they came at this decision-making. When we look at the factors such as the NDCs and the development goals and independent data not presented from the DMRE, renewables is least cost. And yet in their models, it's the most expensive pathway. We don't understand how they got there. And I think if they could work on trying to make it more accessible, so that we don't feel that it's ideologically driven or a vested interest, then I think there would be a stronger ability to communicate with each other. So I think I wanted to just respond to the DGG because I got the impression that maybe there was a sense that our inputs weren't sort of technical enough, but I do think that it's important that all South Africans be given the opportunity to comment and their comments are considered of equal weight, and also that we can voice our opinions in all different ways that we feel is appropriate. If we feel that the formal channels aren't effective, then indeed, yes, people do take to the streets and protest. And I think that's also in the rights of South Africans. So thank you so much.
Thank you, Francisca, and thanks for your input. Donovan, please come in. You are still muted on my side, Donovan.
Oh, sorry, Commissioner. I couldn't hear you. I'd lost you, so I didn't know you said my name. Apologies. It is in line similarly, not similarly, in the same vein that Francesca raised, that we want a little bit an easier explanation so we can take back to members what the plans are and how you arrived at it. Not in a technical way that makes it difficult to interact with, especially members and communities. At the same time, though, we hold a different view to very many others, including most probably the organization that Francesca represents, in that currently the costs for Eskom is largely driven by renewables through IPPs. And so therefore it does worry us when you would have a future where you are dependent on independent power producers and you factor that into renewable costs. I'm not trying to answer for the DRME at all, but for ourselves, we do worry about the overemphasis of renewables, even within this document. We do see an energy mix that must be as fair as possible. And lastly, we would have a problem with anybody from within government being party political, but we wouldn't have a problem with ideology at all. An open ideology should be fine, and so if the department has a particular ideological outlook on energy, we can debate that, but we wouldn't have a problem with them having it. It would be incorrect in any way, but to be party political, yeah, no, that would be incorrect. Thank you, Commissioner.
Yeah. Donovan, your comment now sounds consistent with your earlier input where you said that the production of energy should be the primary responsibility of the state. Would you agree?
Most definitely, most definitely. And even when you're utilizing, and we will go back to the Igoli gas example that is taking place right now as indicative of what could occur. And besides the international examples of Enron and so forth. But quite importantly is the state must be open about their plans. So they must not hide it under things called IPPs and so forth. They must be clear that what they're doing, so we can tackle them. They are given a responsibility, and as citizens and as civil society organizations, where we disagree, we lobby, we raise matters like this, and we go on the street as well. I mean, all within the law, all within it. So yes, most definitely. The state does not, there's an old a statement or maxim rather, not statement, you cannot delegate responsibility. You can you can ask people to do stuff on your behalf, but it still remains your responsibility. And so government must show us where that responsibility, and we do not know where that responsibility would occur and how it will not be devolved in such a way that after a while we are completely dependent on international persons who are, private persons who have a profit motive as opposed to a service motive. Thanks.
Yeah, got it. I don't know if James is back. James Rila, are you back with us?
His hand is no longer up, Brian.
Yes, yes. Yeah. Okay. So now I'm going to come back to you. Do you have a comment on what we were talking about earlier about this generic view that the assumptions are not clear in the IRP?
Oh, yes, Chair. You also asked me a specific question that if I could take one aspect of the assumptions and elaborate on it, just to demonstrate this. Whilst it is true that there is information that has not been made available to the public in the public arena, but there's quite a bit of information that has been shared up to so far, like the DDG alluded to earlier on, Chair. We must also remember that some of the information that we collect from third parties is proprietary. And as a result, we're not able to publish it. So, for example, any information around ESCOM fleet, it would then be best to request that information from ESCOM, because even though the government has collected it, it's not property of the government. But anyway, to cut a long story short, in terms of making an example, if you look at the cost, for example, I know there's been a lot of comments on, I'm not sure why, there's been a lot of comments that have been made on costs, that the cost is not transparent, especially for new technology. So what we have done is, over and above sharing reports where the costs were derived from. And if you read that report is about costs and performance characteristics of new technologies. It goes at length if you read it, in terms of explaining the different buckets of information related to all the technologies you can think about that were considered in this IRP. Things like, for example, on the performance aspect of it would be planned outage rates, fast outage rates, efficiencies, and variable cost. It really, and the beauty about it is cost that was derived for the South African condition, because at some point then those costs gets localized. And we do make a concession that though the report was published in 2021 and the costs are in 2021 monetary terms, we then published or made available on the website a spreadsheet that basically takes all of those costs that then was used into the model. So the spreadsheet is freely available, where we demonstrate that those costs, when they were derived, obviously they were derived in dollar terms of 2021. And then we also published in this very same spreadsheet the inflation data on a monthly basis in the US and in South Africa, and also the rand exchange, for example, what it was in 2021, and also what it was in 2023 April, right? Then with the 2021 costs, we translated them back into dollars, and then we applied, because their derivation was in dollar. We then escalated them using the appropriate US inflation rate to 2023 dollar terms, and this is shown in the spreadsheet explicitly. And then once we have 2023 April 2023 dollar terms for the different technologies, we then use an applicable exchange rate of what it was in April 2023 to make it the cost to transfer them from dollar to rand 2023. The reason why we did it is because the benchmark report that we've used in other ways to compare the cost was already providing such costs in 2023 terms, so to speak. So it then made it possible for us to benchmark or compare and to see where those costs are. And then those are the costs then that were utilized, for example, in the modeling. Unless if there are specific questions, nothing stops for people to seek further clarity on that, Chair. Like, yeah, I mean, that's as explicit as I can get on one piece of assumption. On the forecast, there is a report that was that we also provided on the link that was because the forecast was done by the University of Cape Town Energy Systems Research Group, for example, and it also has got a lot of detail in it, different sectors' contribution to electricity and blah 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 and so forth, Chair. So I think, but there are costs, like I say, that are obviously confidential and remain the proprietary of whatever organization that they've provided. And I can make example. It's not only ESCOM. If you look at the IPP contracts, for example, that have been signed of the different programs, there is definitely no way those costs could be made available. Otherwise we are then in breach. Like, you can't do that. So it cuts both ways. Like, we're not biased towards certain technologies. And I agree that maybe perhaps the document, could have been written differently. That we agree. Perhaps when we go towards the final one, I will take all of this, like the DG says. It's important that everybody provides their comment, technical, Francesca or not, all of those will be taken into account so that we can then improve on the quality of this document, Chair. And I think there was a comment that was a question that was asked by Francesca. Whilst I'm here, Chair, and if you allow me, maybe let me deal with it. He asked, why is it that renewable the plan with renewable energy only is the most expensive plan, whilst there is evidence to show that renewable energy technologies are the cheapest. And this is something that we've been dealing with that we've dealt with in the public engagement sessions that we've held, where we are saying on a rand per kilowatt hour basis, it is true, but what one needs to take into account, though we don't factor it in, is that those renewable energy technologies, wind PV, they do not provide, for example, grid support services, but that's not the point. I think the point is that if you build a power system that is made up of renewable energy, like that scenario shows, and that's not a final plan, by the way, like that scenario shows, it basically shows you that because of their intermittency, you will have bouts of period where you're not able to balance supply and demand. And this is not a South African phenomenon. We know that we've got the best solar resource, the best wind resource. You go also to jurisdictions where, people have got best resources like that, but you hardly ever find a power system that is built on renewable energy only and battery, right? Because it becomes expensive because of the energy you're not able to serve. If you calculate the cost of the total plan, it will also include the cost of that energy that you're not able to serve, Chair, because then what then happens if that energy, you don't serve it? Yeah, so that is that. Hopefully that is clear. But also, people are asking about, the equality of the plan and other aspects of the plan. At this particular point in time, there is no plan on the table. All that we have are the scenarios that shows you, especially from 2030 to 2050 or 2031 to 2050. These are different scenarios that shows you if you put together a bunch of certain technologies, what then that future looks like, right? So, and there's quite a number of them, and none of them is a plan at this particular point in time. A plan like the DDG explained is what then the work, once we've taken into account all these public comments, will then be taken into account. Comparison also, whilst I still have the floor, Chair, to what extent did we take into account, for example, the just energy implementation and the energy action plan? I think those are pertinent questions. But I think, like I said before, without not necessarily nitpicking, If I don't, I mean, this IRP, this analysis that has been done, we have made sure that we take into account what can be realizable, especially on the grid side. You can have, I mean, we've seen projects that could not be procured because you don't have grid availability. If the DMRE puts a plan on the table that does not, that shows you a lot of capacity, and it shows that if you put all that capacity together, then load shedding gets resolved. But then the DMRE cannot provide questions when asked in forum like this and others. How then do you connect that capacity because there is no grid availability? It then makes a mockery of a plan like that, Chair. And I think this is one of the main differences between this plan and the others. Whilst we've acknowledged how the other plans look like, but we are saying, let's take into account the current reality as and when it will unfold up until 2030. If in 3 years' time, somebody has come up and there's a lot of money and servitudes have been attained to improve the grid much quicker, then obviously the plan will be updated at that particular point in time, Chair. But for now, you need to try as much as possible to live within the current reality, Chair. And thank you very much, Chair.
No, siyabonga bhuti. Thanks, Sono. That's pretty detailed. I just want to draw, we've got 5 minutes before we close. And I'm going to ask Deepak to close. Before giving Deepak the floor, I'm going to check if Ndokozo is around, is still available just for closing remarks. But if she's not, I'll hand over to Deepak. But before doing that, I just want to bring in a nuanced view that HAPPY is providing relative to that which is provided by, I think, Donovan, which is the cost for ESCOM is driven by IPPs, and HAPPY has a different perspective. HAPPY, you want to come in and explain what you wrote in the comment? Are you still with us, HAPPY?
Yeah, no, of course, no, I'm here. I was trying to find the button. No, Chad, I think it's something that tends to happen a lot in such forums where a statement such as this, although fair, does not accurately reflect the situation we're in. The current tariff makeup, particularly the one that ESCOM has provided to the energy regulator, makes it very clear that as you move along this procurement program, which is the REAP or the IPP and ESCOM hybrid model, as we call it that, you will have an increase of IPP costs being passed through directly through the ESCOM tariff, because that's the decision that we've made as a country, that it won't be a separate tariff. But what is currently occurring is that because they make up such a small proportion of the total capacity that is being provided and the installed capacity as well, their price is not as high as what it would be if they were in at like a 30% level. So where it is right now, I think in the previous MIPD multi-year price determination period, it was sitting at about between 5 to 7%, and I stand to be corrected. But even with that, it is at a declining scale. So we came in earlier on round one, around 2 rand odd cents for average prices for REAP projects, and now we're sitting way below 1 rand, and some are sitting at 50 cents. So it is at a declining scale, whereas the current coal or the current fleet of technologies that we're using, say for nuclear, at least as the DDG was explaining, are increasing. And that's got a number of factors associated with that, including the diesel peaking stations that we're using, which are also being used at a higher rate, which is increasing the price. Hence, we keep on getting these number of escalations. So I think it needs to be fair that, yes, the price of electricity is getting unsustainable for everyone, but let us be much more true to the fact that the actual reason why they're increasing is not because of this particular approach, but is because of the tariff design and what actually makes up the full ambit of the tariff. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Brett. I'm going to first request Dokozo to give closing remarks, and then I'll hand over to Deepak. Dokozo, please come in.
Thank you so much, Chair. And thank you to everyone for the comments and inputs. Let me firstly say on all the questions and comments and inputs that are technical, we would really appreciate it if you can send those in writing so that we're able to consider them and then respond to you as well. But what we've also started doing as we receive questions and comments from our public engagements that we've had so far, we prepare responses and we upload those on our website so that the public can see that we really do take time to respond to their comments. But we will also, after the comments period, consider those comments because they will help us see our blind spots and we know what to remodel and how, and what to consider as assumptions and what to consider as sensitivities. So we really appreciate this. And lastly, there was a question around ideologies. All we do, Tina, is follow the 1998 white paper. And if you look at that white paper, it really talks to a energy mix, which is what we are seeing unfolding in the country. And we are therefore allowing the model to tell us how much of what energy source must be considered in the policy decisions. And the document currently out is definitely not the final document. It was just to share with the public, these are the scenarios we've considered, these are the assumptions, and this is what we are seeing. And we are saying, then look at it, tell us. The final adjusted plan will come after we've considered all the inputs and we have remodeled, and then we will redraft and take it to cabinet. That's why we call it the policy adjusted plan. That's the final one. So there are no decisions on this one. I just wanted to clear that so that colleagues must not think that DMRE went and made decisions. It's not decisions yet. Decisions will be taken by cabinet, and then we will issue out a policy adjusted plan, which then has firm decisions that have been taken. But thank you so much. We really appreciate these comments and inputs.
Thank you, Ntokozo. I now going to hand over to Deepak, and Deepak, after you've spoken, please close the session.
Thank you very, very much, Brian. Firstly, Commissioner Mantashe, thank you for ably steering what is quite a complex subject matter. Second thanks is to the DMRE colleagues, both DDG Ntokozo as well as Sonwabo. Thank you so much for availing yourself, because I think the contours that you presented of the existing document, and in the PCC, we are very glad that it is a draft document open for comments. We see this as an opportunity for the PCC itself to fulfill its mandate for procedural justice, as well as inclusive conversation around what is clearly a very critical subject matter, both for our political economy, for our energy security, as well as our social development going forward. So while we acknowledge that the IRP is a statement premised on modeling an energy mix, let us be aware that its consequences are national. Its consequences are in the current immediate period, hopefully addressing some of the immediacy of the challenges we are experiencing with respect to security and access, but also in the middle to long-term, dealing with issues related to socioeconomic development, growth, job creation. And in this respect, I want to thank firstly the invited panelists for their very rich contribution from their perspective. To paraphrase Francesca, both technical as well as political economic, as well as, I would imagine, from the vantage point of some interests and some context that certain stakeholders come from. The PCC sees this, as I indicated, as part of its own process, and we are going to be having a conversation as the full PCC Commission this coming Friday, and we look forward once again to having the DMRE address our commissioners. As for specific issues, I'm not going to attempt to summarize the issues as well as the variety of different perspectives that have emerged from this conversation. Safe to say that both the Secretariat as well as the Chair have been listening attentively, and we will obviously take the stakeholder inputs into our own process as the PCC in order to make PCC recommendations, which in turn have taken into account all of our social partners' contributions. We do know that the IRP has quite important ramifications for development, as well as we know that in the what is called in the IRP as it is currently in draft form, the first horizon and the second horizon, that our transition, both with respect to socioeconomic achievement of our objectives, but also to respond to the climate issues at hand, we certainly welcome the two windows that are contained in it. We also acknowledge, I think, some of the innovation that sits at the heart of the current IRP, and we would like, and I think everyone in this dialogue has indicated that where there's a need for certain assumptions as well as modeled outputs which have been taken into account as preconditions for arriving at conclusions, that there needs to be a fairly high degree of transparency. And we are hopeful that particularly the technical inputs that request clarity with respect to both assumptions, as well as the integrity, as well as the assumptions that go into those models, can be shared as we move into this extended commentary period, for which, as the PCC, we certainly want to thank the DMRE, because we believe, in the words of some of our speakers, that while a lot of technical, modeled, scientific, and empirical evidence underpins the IRP, really we need the IRP to be embraced by as many in our country as possible, and secondly, to be a really good base from which we can launch, from an energy point of view, our socioeconomic objectives going forward. With those words, I want to thank all the participants, both the invited participants as well as the attendees to this dialogue who have made comments. We certainly are going to take that seriously into account as we finalize the PCC's own recommendations with respect to the IRP 2023, and welcome the DGG's assurance that this is a draft for public comment, which public comments will be embraced and taken on board prior to the finalization of a document which gets presented to Cabinet. Thank you very much for attending, and we hope that you keep on patronizing and attending all of our dialogues, which we believe is a very important platform to give real practical expression to the procedural justice that we as the PCC are committed to. Thank you very much, and have a very good afternoon.
Cheers. Thank you. Goodbye.
Thank you, Deepak. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, everyone.